Welcome to our first Coffee Connect of 2023. We are talking about ringing in with positive practices. So hopefully if you work at a school, this will be really helpful for the work you're doing in the classroom. And if you work at a ESU or district office, this will be helpful when you work with those from schools. We're the social emotional behavior learning specialist with Nebraska NeMTSS. I'm Mackenzie Rydell. I currently serve regions 1 and 2, which is ESUs 4, 5, 6 and LPS, and ESU 2 and 3 and OPS. And I come from the school psychology world. I'll let the others introduce themselves.
Thanks, Mackenzie. I'm Jill Gunther. I'm another one of the social emotional behavioral learning specialists, and I serve regions 3 and 4. So that's ESUs 1, 7, 8, and then 9, 10, 11, and 17. And my background is a speech language pathologist and then special education leadership.
And I am Emily Arkfeld. I'm the 3rd SEBL specialist, serving region 5, ESUs 13, 15, and 16. And my background is school social work and mental health.
Awesome. So if you have not heard of a SEBL specialist, our role has been around for about 1.5 years now. We're a grant funded position through the Nebraska Center of Research on Children, Youth, Families, and Schools through the University of Nebraska Lincoln. And we work with Nebraska NeMTSS really around the systematic implementation of social emotional behavioral learning. Whether that be just starting the process or having a lot of stuff built out and figuring out how we can integrate that social emotional behavior learning within the current systems. We offer professional development and implementation support to those throughout the state. We're free. So we always do the 3 signature practices. This is from Castle. And so the first one is a welcoming inclusion activity. And so we do a Mentimeter for this one today, and we want to know what is your word for this year. If you don't pick a word for the year, you can pick a word for the day today. And you can go to menti.com or scan the QR code with your phone. And then the code is 5146228. And you can log in and put in your word for the year. Blessed, I like that. Growth, truth, optimistic. Got some optimism today in the room. Acceptance. Listen. It's a good one. It's easy to get caught up in the everyday. All right. We'll go ahead and move on with the content. So if you haven't been on Coffee Connect before, we have Padlet. This Padlet is the same resources, the same link as it has been this whole year. We're going to have the same link, but then we go in between each Coffee Connect and revamp the resources and create a new Padlet for the previous one. And so each Coffee Connect that we do in the end has its own Padlet with the resources, the slides, and the recording. And it'll be accessible to you. You're free to share it out with your colleagues and invite them to join our Coffee Connects as well. There is a password, it's NeMTSS in all capitals. And Jill put the link in the chat for the slides and also for the Padlet, so you can follow along, click on any links as we go. So social emotional behavioral learning, Nebraska NeMTSS defines it as the systematic process of fostering social and emotional skills among students and also adults in order to create safe and supportive environments with positive behavioral and mental health outcomes for all. We just added in that mental health outcomes probably a month ago, because we really want to continuously work on the alignment between systems. Mental health is a big concern right now in the schools, and the supports that we're providing for supporting student mental health really fits nicely into supporting the social emotional wellness of students, and also the behavioral side too. And so we really want to do this all systematically and build it all into one system. We believe that behavior is really intertwined with those social emotional skills. And so a lot of times if we're seeing behavior we don't want to see, it's because they're missing a skill. And we need these social emotional skills to successfully meet our behavior expectations, whether that be in school, at home, in your career, or in life. We mirror our work off of the 5 CASEL competencies. These are more constructs, big picture. You can kind of name what they are, but we wanted to give a couple more examples of what skills are really linked to those competencies. And so this web here that we made just gives some more examples of what skills might be along with the competency. And like I mentioned, we work for Nebraska NeMTSS, so everything we do, we really want to build into the systems, make it a comprehensive system that will be sustainable. And so you do this by using these essential elements of shared leadership, communication, collaboration, partnership, using evidence-based practices without or throughout your continuous layered continuum of support. You're wanting to build the capacity and infrastructure for implementing your system and use data-based problem solving and decision-making throughout. So like I mentioned, we're talking about positive practices today. Why positive practices? We know that when we use positive practices, it really creates that trusting relationship between staff, between students, and between families. We know that when students feel they are connected and belonged, they tend to perform better academically. They tend to want to come to school more. They really just strive better. And as staff, the same goes. If we have good relationships and we feel connected and belonging, we tend to like our jobs better. And we really we all strive for that belonging in our environment. Also, if you're thinking of positive practices as an adult, using them with students, it can prompt you to consider possible reasons or function for behavior. It kind of separates the emotional reaction to the, it gives some separation. So instead of reacting, you're more responding to the behavior. And then it gives an opportunity to teach and reinforce some new SEBL skills. Like I mentioned before, a lot of times when we see behavior, there's a missing skill there. And so it gives the opportunity to kind of pinpoint what's going on. And then how can we help reinforce the skill that is missing that we really want to see that will help them be more successful in their behaviors. We know that behavior is a way of communication. Sometimes our students don't know how to communicate what they're feeling or what they need, but they communicate that through their actions. And when we use positive practices, we're really using a preventative approach. So preventing those behaviors from occurring. When we think of a positive classroom environment, we can think of these 3 core, you could call them discipline practices. This comes straight from the tiered fidelity inventory or the TFI. A lot of schools use this for their PBIS implementation. And so you want to think of having a proactive classroom, an instructive classroom, and a restorative classroom. And so that really means the front end, what are you doing to prevent these behaviors? What are you doing proactively, not just for behaviors, but for in general, your whole classroom environment? How are you instructing along the way and kind of intervening and using that supportive practice throughout? And then how are you restoring when something does happen? How are you building up that relationship and moving on in a strong way with that relationship in mind? So when we think of behavior, When we think of behavior change, we can really think of the front end and the back end. And so what does that look like on the prevention side? If we have a behavior that we don't want to occur, you think, what are you doing to prevent that behavior before it happens? To either have it not happen or have it happen less intensely, or the response of the back end. What are you doing after the behavior to either reinforce it from happening more often or to reinforce the behavior that you want to see? So this really gets into that function-based thinking, and it can work not only for individual students, but for class students, for a whole class or a group. And really, we can think of behavior, but we got to think of the before and the after in order to effectively figure out how to change it. We're talking about positive practices. We took this from the Midwest PBIS framework. So they have these 6 areas: classroom values, routines and procedures, engagement and opportunities to respond, encourage positive behavior, active supervision, physical environment, and continuum of response. And these practices go for all ages. So it can be something that you use as a pre-K teacher, but also these practices are effective all the way up through that secondary level. And the underlying thing, though it's not explicitly stated, is really those relationships. We know when we have relationships with students, we're able to build that trusting environment, we're able to build that connectedness, and we tend to see just more positive behaviors and better, safer environments for our students when we have those relationships built throughout all of these practices. So I'm going to pass it on to Jill, and we're going to break these down a little bit further.
Perfect. Thanks, Mackenzie. And a great reminder about relationships as well. So like Mackenzie said, we're going to go through each of the different positive practices, provide a couple just resources and information around each of those as well. You can find all of the resources that we share within that Padlet link that we shared earlier, but we also have some of the links directly on the slides as well. So the first one here, so classroom values, routines and procedures. And each time we introduce one of the positive practices, you'll see this nice just representation, nice reminder of that interconnectedness of the positive practice with those SEBL competencies. So within the positive practice of classroom values, routines, and procedures, this is just a nice visual representation, again, of that interconnection between those behavior values, those social, emotional, behavioral learning skills. So you might have those expectations posted throughout your building. You may have them posted within your classroom. So this is just a nice reminder to really explicitly point out those values and then that relationship with those social, emotional, behavioral learning skills. There's a couple just nice resources linked on this slide as well. And again, like I mentioned, they're also in the Padlet. That first one, so actually the first two, they come both from PBIS. But that first one just has a nice visual, just kind of template table where it has some examples of those school-wide expectations or values, and then really incorporating those social emotional competencies. That second link there, again, comes from PBIS, but has some great links for further information. It has some different tables, as well as just like steps to support and respond to those students' social, emotional, behavioral learning needs, and some great links within each of those as well. So we wanted to be sure to share those resources with you guys. Engagement and opportunities to respond is the next one. We're going to just kind of share some examples, kind of talk a little bit about how those could be incorporated within. So opportunities to respond. So really thinking about 4 key components. So thinking about teacher instructional talk. So when a teacher is really promoting student responses. So for example, pointing to a question or maybe writing an answer on a whiteboard, things like that. prompting, cueing, signaling, those things given to students, providing that wait time for those responses, and then that specific feedback for correcting and the response. These can be provided individually. They might be provided just within a small group, perhaps to the whole class. But these are just some different examples that you see here on the screen of some different opportunities to respond. Specifically kind of thinking about those talking chips there. So those could be utilized in a variety of different ways. So perhaps each color of that chip maybe represents something in particular. So maybe red is the facts, maybe yellow is a supporting idea, maybe blue is a challenging point, maybe white is a question. And they can utilize those talking chips by throwing them in maybe a particular bucket, maybe in the center of the circle, after they've shared, after they've talked, and then really wanting each of the students, each of the group members to just kind of share throughout. So utilizing talking chips is just one example. We have a few other examples. So like the true false, the thumbs up, thumbs down for agreeing and disagreeing. You see the whiteboard, like the whiteboard paddles there. Things like think, pair, share, the yes, no. So just a variety of different examples as shown here. Thinking about also, so when Mackenzie started us off, when thinking about our word for the year, so welcoming inclusion activities, so those 3 CASEL signature practices, also thinking about optimistic closure. So we have an example just of like some of the notes of gratitude that we've used as optimistic closure activities in the past, and then those welcoming activities that our colleague and friend Heather Robbins has put together. So great resources when we're thinking about incorporating those as well. We have the mood meter on here, thinking about like zones of regulation or color zones, and then also restorative circles, a great example of this as well. Thinking about engagement strategies. So we have the question wheel on here. We have the would you rather questions. If you go into the Padlet, we have a variety of just different resources around engaging strategies that are linked in. Competitive games, so things like maybe Jeopardy or incorporating bingo, maybe like a jigsaw, being able to utilize that, a gallery walk or a gallery wall. So all just different examples of some engaging strategies, but really working to expand those relationships, really thinking of stepping outside our comfort zone, getting to know our students, getting to know each other within that classroom community with some of those just different questions that maybe we wouldn't come across otherwise. So we've linked some of those in there for you guys as well. Continuing on, so we have that first link. So again, referring back to Heather Robbins, she put together some great resources. They're called 10-minute tidbits. And the one that we have linked in here is specifically around recognition and reinforcement. And then also some great resources from NCPMI. So this first one is really on building positive relationships with young children. It has some great reminders, even maybe something that you might want to print off as just kind of a reminder, just kind of post it around, but some great reminders for those engaging strategies, really working to build those positive relationships with our students. The second link has some great practical strategies, that third link, again, some of those practical strategies, and also includes the emotional piggy bank. And so as you can see, like filling the piggy bank every day, just as that nice reminder. So thinking about as educators, as caregivers, really engaging in those strategies to build those positive relationships with our students. And every time we're really utilizing those engaging strategies, we're providing that positive feedback, we're really making a deposit in that student's emotional piggy bank, in that student's relationship piggy bank. And so on the reverse side, when we're thinking about adults making demands or criticizing, that's really making a withdrawal in that emotional piggy bank or that relationship piggy bank, if we're thinking about it that way. So really reflecting on our interactions, our everyday interactions with our students, thinking about just making those reflections with ourselves on whether we're making those deposits or whether we're making those withdrawals. So just good reminders there and some ways to kind of really reflect on that as an educator. The last link on here is around hot buttons. So this is a great tool, again, as a nice reflection tool, but we all have those hot buttons that can get pushed, right? So rather than feeling that frustration, that anger, that guilt, just thinking about just a more productive way to really respond and have that emotional response. So really kind of thinking through those things. What are those hot buttons that I've identified? What would be an appropriate emotional response? So again, those are linked in here as well as in our Padlet. Opportunities to provide student choice, engaging student voice. So good reminders here. We have shared some of these in our previous Coffee Connect around student voice. But again, really thinking about engagement and really thinking about providing those opportunities for that student choice. So opportunities within activities. So the student is able to choose materials to be used in a specific activity. Thinking about the where, so maybe the student being able to choose the location for completion of that activity. Thinking about the when, so the student determining the time an activity should occur. The what, determining how they will demonstrate their learning and being offered maybe a variety of different ways to be able to demonstrate that learning. So again, good reminders here and perhaps something to post on your desk or in your office as some different ways to really engage that student voice. Thinking about family engagement and communication. So really building those student and teacher or educator relationships. So it's important to engage our families. We really want to build those relationships with them. And these are some just different examples of some ways to do that. So a couple of these we have shared in the past, but again, good reminders as we're talking about those positive practices as well. So there is a parent survey example linked in. There is a positive notes home example that could be modified or could just be used as is and just kind of printed off to be able to have them easily accessible to share with students and with families. We have a good news note also linked in there as well. And then just a nice reminder that those positive phone calls or those positive emails home, maybe even a communication app that might be utilized with families. Any time that we can really incorporate those, that really helps to build those strong homeschool and then student family educator relationships, and then in turn helping to increase that overall engagement. Our next one, so encouraging appropriate or encouraging positive behavior. And then again, that reminder that of that relationship, that interconnection with our social, emotional, behavioral learning competencies. So the positive practice of encouraging appropriate behavior, so pre-correcting, prompting, where the adult is really reminding students of those expectations prior to the activities, so that we may have that just successful outcome, right? So we want to remind them of those expectations prior to those activities so that we can decrease that risk of failure, right? We provide this so that, or we may provide this in a variety of different ways. So we have a few of those just kind of outlined on the slide here. So that could look like a gesture. It could look like verbal, maybe a visual being provided. It could be a model, either partial model, maybe a full model, really showing those expected behaviors. It could also be a physical, maybe hand over hand prompt. So just kind of different ways to think about that level of prompting. We also have a nice just reminder. So I'm getting ready to go home when I have a nice visual checklist there. So of all of the things that need to be ready to go in preparation to be able to go home for the end of the day. There's also a few just great videos here. So at the bottom of the screen, there's a little bit shorter video. There's also a longer video just as a resource to provide to you guys as we're thinking about pre-correcting and prompting. Positive descriptive feedback. So great examples here. So really describing that desired behavior, really tying it to that school-wide expectation or value, and then making it very specific to the student, to the group, and then that positive praise. So how it helps. So we have an example here for you guys. So that was nice versus when we're thinking about positive descriptive feedback. Tommy, you were very respectful to the speaker when you raised your hand and asked good questions at the end of the presentation. Speakers will want to continue to come to our school because they feel respected. Thank you. So again, just a nice example of really including those components when we're thinking about that positive and descriptive feedback. Again, some resources from NCPMI. Obviously, this here is really geared towards early childhood, but just like Mackenzie had said earlier, all of these things are great for students of all ages. There are some that may need to be adapted or modified just a little bit, but all great things for students or adults of all ages. So this screenshot here that you see, so with the verbal encouragement, just different examples, as well as the nonverbal encouragement, that is that first link on the slide. Also have just some different starters. So when we're thinking about that positive feedback and positive encouragement, some starters, some kind of sentence starters to be able to utilize. And then we also linked in just a few other resources around that area as well. And then I will turn it over to Emily to cover our next positive practice.
Thank you, Jill. We're going to move into talking about active supervision now. Again, that constant reminder that when we're thinking about these positive practices, that those social emotional behavioral learning competencies are at the heart of what we're doing and that they are all interconnected. So here we have just some features of active supervision. And I think we often think about the moving and the scanning when we think of supervision. You think of, a lifeguard, sometimes the visual that goes with that. But we really need to think about the interactions as well with that. So our movement and scanning is constant. It targets both the appropriate and inappropriate behaviors. The scanning really targeting our known problem areas. So maybe we move over in that area more often, or we're making sure we're checking that area more often, and using both our visual and audio cues if we're seeing something that is at the beginning of a problem behavior or an unwanted behavior. And it increases those opportunities for positive contact. So if you're constantly scanning, you can catch those good things happening just as often as those negative things, and being sure to call those out. So when we see those positive things, using that positive contact in a friendly, helpful manner, proactive, and we are giving that in a high rate of delivery. So as often as you can, recognizing those positive things and acknowledging them, giving those positive reinforcements, whatever those might be for your classroom, using instructional responses. So keeping those contingent on the behavior and not argumentative, keeping those very factual based and the specific to the behavior. And then delivery of logical consequences as needed. Again, keeping that neutral, non-argumentative, and consistent. So across behaviors, across different teachers, we want to make sure we are using consistent expectations and values and consequences as well. And then really making sure that we are using that team directed database decision making. So if we notice we have these problems in this area often, we are bringing that data to the team, we are meeting frequently, we are talking about that, and we are problem solving around that. If we have kids who we are continuing to see some unwanted behaviors, we're bringing that data to the team, talking about it, and problem solve, how do we help support that student, or how do we help support these problem areas? So that is consistently happening. We have this checklist here, and in a lot of the resources we've shared have some of these checklists and these self-assessments as well. And so just that really looking in on, am I doing these things? Do I move through all areas during supervision? Am I having more positive interactions? So that 4-to-1, 5-to-1, whatever that might look like. Are you using a behavior log to record and share? We know it's hard. Teachers are busy doing lots of things all of the time. But the more they can keep the data, the better that is for our students, for our staff, for our educators to help, really ensure that we are doing the best to support everybody we possibly can. And are we meeting regularly? It's often on the calendar. Are we actually following through and having those meetings, or are we letting other things take priority in that? So this is a sample of self-assessment checklist. There are other ones that do similar things in our Padlet for you guys as well. Moving on to the physical environment, wanting to make sure that we are being intentional when we set up our classroom and our spaces for the best use of our educators and our students. And so why do we want to do that? It increases that on-task behavior and that perception of safety. So if you come into a classroom or a space that is cluttered and busy, it can feel overwhelming, and it can, lead to not only the adults, but students and the adults just to feel unsafe or not secure in the area, feel overwhelmed. It supports the respect of others' personal space. If you are, constantly when you push back your chair, you're bumping into the chair behind you, you've got elbows on other people's desks, you're just running into each other. So being aware of, this is my space here, this is my safe bubble, and not overwhelming that. Makes it easier to use curriculum visuals. So again, if you're busy and kids' views of things that are needed for their different subjects and curriculum, if they're blocked from viewing that, that's going to be a disservice to them. So making sure that you're setting it up so that students have a clear view of the visuals that they might need to help support their learning, and allows for the teacher movement, which is that active supervision. So teachers need to be able to safely and comfortably get through the desks and get through the tables, to make sure that our students are being safe in their environment as well. And as you are setting that up, making sure that you're considering, again, that ease of movement. So am I having to squeeze between desks, or can I move freely as I need to change direction if I see something on the other side of the classroom that I want to get to quickly? And then also just that accessibility to exits. We want our kids to feel like if there were an emergency and they needed to get somewhere, they could do so safely. Having those designated areas, so space for supplies and activities that are not cluttered with the desks and the tables. So this is this area for this, and this is this area for this, and being able to move through those freely. And then thinking about the height of objects as well. So thinking about like our early childhood, especially if we have posters and things that are up way above their eye level, they're not going to be seeing that. So if you have your routines and your expectations and values and all of that not in eye level, then it's easier for them to forget or not focus on that. So making sure you're hanging them where they can see them easily, and having appropriate size furniture for students. It is not great for us adults to have to get down into a little chair that is like a foot off the ground, but our students need to feel safe and secure, again, in their environment. So lots of resources on here around that. Some guiding questions for planning your physical space, some classroom essentials from NCPMI. So if you are in the classroom, these are great. If you are helping support teachers in setting up their classroom, whether they are new or moving to a new building or a new space in the building, these can be helpful things to walk through as you're considering your physical environment. This is a fantastic but long handout on inventory of practices promoting social emotional competence. So that is, the whole document is linked in there, but we pulled out this one specifically on designing those supportive environments. So thinking about those considerations, thinking about the why, going through this checklist here and seeing, like, does my space allow for, arranges learning centers to allow room for multiple children. So helps you just think through those things as you are setting up your environment or evaluating your environment. Moving into our last one, talking about the continuum of response. So, all things we do in NeMTSS is based on that layered continuum. And so there are things that are going to, again, work for all students and then we're going to need to increase that as our problem behaviors continue, or students continue to struggle or areas continue to struggle. So thinking about some effective responses, we've talked about some of these in different areas, but praising other students. So, Jill did that positive descriptive feedback. And so if you see a student who is following the expectation or the value, calling that out, doing it explicitly. And so then that allows other students to say, oh, am I doing that? Or did I do that? And so some of that internal reflection, and then hopefully use some of their own self-management to get themselves into a behavior that follows our expectations and values. Using reteaching. So again, stating and demonstrating the expected behavior or the expected value and have the student demonstrate that. We talked a lot about engagement strategies, and we do in all of our Coffee Connects, because so much of what education is based, well, everything that education is based on relationships, and everything comes after that. Using that proximity. So standing, that movement and scanning, but standing next to kids who might be having a little bit of a difficulty, and then hoping that the student recognizes that and uses the teacher's proximity to use some of their self-management skills to control their impulses or to improve their behavior. Attend, wait, and praise. So engaging a child who might be on the verge of a unwanted behavior, and then step away right away. So you don't need to hover over them. And then when you see them returning to the expectation or doing what you have asked of them, then to returning and giving that immediate praise for that. We talked about providing choice and those nonverbal cues, whatever those might be. So eye contact, hand gestures, card system, picture cues, just letting that student know, like, I've got my eye on you, I'm seeing what you're doing, and I will intervene if I need to. And so using all of these responses as needed. And our teachers know their students best. So what works for some might not work for others. And so having all of these in their back pocket to use for their students as needed. And with that, Walt Hill has put together and allowed us to share this great intervention bank that they have. So what are those low to no effort things? That proximity, using those nonverbal cues, using a timer, turning the light on and off, just some of those quick and easy things to get your students' attention, to maybe shift what's going on. And then if that's not working, moving to that little more effort, having a conversation, giving a redirection, sitting with a student. And then if that's still not working or students are really struggling, going to that high, at bank 3, that higher effort things, where that's going to take more time on your part to put in place for the student. So behavior plan, contacting parents, changing up your whole class seating. So a great resource on there to build your own from or use as needed as well. And then these with then statements or sentences, and I like these because I think they can be used in a variety of ways. So they can be used for routines and schedules, especially for your littles and pictures. So when you put away your backpack, then you can talk to your friend. When you have gotten your lunch tray, then you can sit down at your table, and you can put that with visuals to help them recognize and follow the expectations. And then they can also just be used when a student is having an unwanted behavior or struggling a little bit. So when you speak to me in a calmer voice, then we can talk this through. So there's a handout in here that talks about when then sentences and the benefits of them, and then a handout as well if you want to just write out some of your own to use. And that is linked in the Padlet also. When we think about responding versus reacting, we are human and kids are going to push our buttons, and we are going to have life things that make us easier to want to snap, like those snap decisions. But if we can take that time to self-regulate and respond to our students with empathy and focus on their strengths and use predictable responses, we know the benefits are going to be better for our students and therefore for ourselves and for our classroom as well. Because we are relying on that relationship that we have and building that trust in the classroom. And when we react, it leaves our students uncertain, and so they feel unsafe in that. If we're just focused on the problem, there is not as much learning that comes from that, and often leads to misunderstandings and can hinder that relationship as well. So a nice visual to, hand out, share, have in planners, whatever, just that reminder to respond versus react whenever possible. And then this is from the Prevent, Teach, Reinforce for young children. But it's a great just visual that puts all of these things together. Again, to share out, we like things that are bright and easily accessible in one shot. So I wanted to give this one to you guys. So using that 5-to-1 ratio of positive attention we talked about, making sure that we are really, especially now at the, kids are back in the swing of things a little bit, but really someone had said it best, like vomiting out the positive attention at the beginning of really, let's start the year off great with all of this positivity instead of just feeling like we have to again respond or react to everything. Using those predictable schedules, they are best for everyone. And again, like Jill and Mackenzie both said, they're great for our 3 and our 5-year-olds. They are great for our 16 and our 8-year-olds. If our kids know what to expect and what their routine is, they're going to feel more secure in that. Kids might not want boundaries, those middle and high school kids, but they really thrive when they have them. So setting those up. Again, so establishing those routines within those routines. So let's have that really laid out. Directly teaching the behavioral expectations and directly teaching those peer-related social skills. So we can't expect that our students of any age know what our behavior expectations are or know how to relate and speak and work with their peers. And so we need to make sure we're taking the time to explicitly teach that to our students. And that leads us to the end. So questions, comments, please put them in the chat. I've seen a few things. I love it. Thank you. Our February 15th Coffee Connect is on using SEBL data. We'd love to see you there. Again, if you can't make it, they are recorded and shared out. These are upcoming February events. You might have seen this sent out as we are really working to integrate PBIS and SEBL. Our plan is to put this out kind of every semester, season, spring, fall of what is coming up. And so these are up there. Not all the registrations are ready yet, so those will be rolling out. The best place to probably find them is on our social media, our Facebook, Twitter, or on our website as linked in there as well with that registration information. And then our office hours is something new. Sorry, Mackenzie, something new that we are trying this spring. We're adding all of these trainings. We're doing these Coffee Connects which are content heavy, and we like sharing these resources with you guys, but we know there's so much value in talking to each other and about what is going on in your ESU or what's going on in your district or in your school. And so we want to give the opportunity for participants in these events and trainings to come ask more questions, to talk to each other about like, this is great on paper, but like, what does this actually look like? Is anyone doing this? And how are you doing that? So we've opened those up in hopes that we can get some more collaboration among the educators across our state. And then we have our exit ticket as we always do. I know we try to keep it short and sweet so it's not too hard for you guys. This is really how we learn, what's working well, what do you want more of, what do you want less of, what topics would be really helpful for you, what is relevant to what's going on in your schools right now. So please take time to fill those out if you would. There's also the opportunity to get the certificate of attendance through that. So if you need that for CEUs or your district or anything like that, that is through there. And we are to our optimistic closure. So if you, again, please stay and ask questions or comments if you have them. If you need to go, actually, everybody, not even if you need to go. We would love to know what is one practice you currently use, or something, if you're not in the schools now, what was something that was like your go-to that worked for like really quick, great, or what is one thing that you're like, gosh, I really probably could do some more of that, or I'm working with some educators where I think that they could really benefit from adding this into their day. You can drop it in the chat. You can unmute if you feel so inclined. We love to hear other voices. I'm going
I
to
just want to make a quick comment about all of these strategies are really, it's not new, and good teaching is good teaching. And these strategies are what good teachers have always used, but we kind of get in a rut sometimes and forget that we have all of these things in our toolbox. And so I think it's really important for this work because it helps us remember that, oh yes, I really need to, my active supervision could be, could grow a little bit, or the way I praise students maybe needs to be a little bit more specific. We know how to do it. It's just that we have to make it intentional.
Thank you, Linda. Great points as always. We are at time, so if you have a practice or something you want to put in the chat on your way out as you leave, we would appreciate it. Otherwise, you guys are free to continue your day. Stay if you have questions or comments. If you want to talk to us about our job openings, hang out. We'd love to talk about them. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.